Hello, I'm Annabelle Whitman. I'm 30 years old and I live in a small town about a 40-minute drive from Seattle. Every morning, my life starts the same way. I make myself a cup of coffee in a chipped white mug, flip on the local weather report more out of habit than interest, and walk across the backyard to my office, a converted shed less than 10 meters from my back door. From the outside, it still looks like a storage unit someone forgot to repaint. Inside, it's the headquarters of a small tech company I co-founded in the renewable energy field. We design systems that help factories reduce their energy waste. It's complicated, full of data, tiny optimizations, and problems that keep me awake at night in a good way. Not everyone understands what I do, not even my family. To them, co-founder of a renewable energy startup might as well be girl who fiddles with wires and tightens screws all day. I used to try to explain it. Power grids, smart sensors, emissions. I'd watch their eyes glaze over and feel my words evaporate mid-sentence. Eventually, I stopped. If someone asked about my family, my parents, or my older sister Melissa, I would just smile a little and say, "It's been a while since we talked." I'd leave it at that. Not because I'm hiding anything, but because at some point, the story stopped feeling worth telling. I haven't been in touch with them for over 2 years now. No calls, no texts, no holidays, no birthdays. Nothing. Just one long, quiet stretch, like someone cut the line that used to connect us and no one bothered tying it back together. I used to believe family was everything, but then, 2 years ago, on my mother's birthday, everything changed. 2 years earlier, about 3 weeks before Mom's birthday, I had just booked my flight and gotten time off work. The plan was simple: go home early, stay a few days, help prepare like every year. Nothing dramatic, just tradition. I wanted to give them a heads up, so I called the house. My mom usually picked up, but that day my father answered after just 2 rings. "Hey, Dad," I said, balancing my phone between my shoulder and ear while I poured fresh coffee. "I'll be coming home 2 days early. If there's anything you need me to pick up or help with, just let me know." At first, he gave one of those vague hums, the kind that fills silence without actually saying anything. Then he hesitated. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded heavier than usual, like he was trying to swallow something down. "Annabelle, if possible, maybe don't come home this year." I blinked, the coffee pot hovering midair. I thought he was concerned about my schedule or the cost of travel. That would have made sense. "It's fine, Dad," I said lightly. "I've got everything sorted. It's no trouble." There was a longer pause this time. I could almost hear him choosing his next words, weighing them like they might stain the air. He spoke again, firmer, colder. "Melissa's bringing her boyfriend home this year. He's a manager, someone important, speaks well, dresses properly." He exhaled. "And your job, well, it's not very comfortable to talk about, so it's best if you don't come." I felt heat rise from the back of my neck all the way to my face. My fingers tightened around the handle of the pot until it creaked. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "Are you seriously saying that to me right now?" He didn't deny it, didn't laugh and say it was a bad joke, didn't soften it at all. Instead, he answered in a tone I will remember until the day I die. Plain, sharp, final. "You coming home would just embarrass the whole family. If you insist on coming, don't call me your father." And then he hung up. I set the coffee pot down on the counter a little too hard. It clattered, spilling a few drops onto my bare feet. My hand was trembling, damp with sweat. The apartment around me was utterly silent. No TV, no footsteps, just the hum of the fridge and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. His words echoed in my head, slow and clear, like a recording, stuck on repeat. "You coming home would just embarrass the whole family. If you insist on coming, don't call me your father." For a second, I wondered if I'd misheard him. Maybe he meant something else. Maybe I was being dramatic. But no, each syllable replayed exactly as he'd said it, cold as ice, solid as stone. There was no slip of the tongue, no space left for hope. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. My throat tightened, like something huge had lodged there and refused to go down. And right then, like a dam breaking, old memories rushed in. Family photos where I was half hidden behind someone else. Group shots where Melissa stood in front, smiling brightly while my face hovered somewhere near the edge of the frame, slightly out of focus. No one ever told me to step aside. I just learned to. Every critical moment in our family revolved around Melissa. Her birthday parties, her school achievements, her breakups, her promotions. There was always a reason to gather around her, to comfort, to praise, to clap, As for me, I can't remember the last time someone in that house looked me in the eye and asked, "Are you okay, Annabelle?" Melissa is 2 years older than me, but it never felt like just an age gap. She was the hope, the child with a future, the one my parents bragged about when relatives came over. In those same conversations, if I came up at all, it was a quick aside. "Annabelle, oh, she works with computers or something. She's fine." I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed out of trouble, and quietly took care of things, maybe one day they'd finally see me. But they didn't. Turns out, when you're used to being invisible, no one really notices when you're gone. I started covering my parents' utility bills, electricity, water, internet, almost 2 years before that phone call. It began with Mom calling me late one evening, sounding small and tired. She said the cost of living had gone up, the bills had spiked, and their retirement income just wasn't enough anymore. Then, softly, she added, "If you could help us a little, it would mean a lot." Of course, I agreed. I figured it would be a temporary thing. 3 months, maybe 6. But the months blurred into each other. Nothing changed. No one ever mentioned an end date. Now and then I'd ask, "Is Melissa helping out at all, Mom?" She would dodge every time. "Just help us this month, sweetheart. Your sister will pitch in next time." Or, "Your sister is handling your father's medical expenses. That's not easy either." I heard those lines so often I could recite them in my sleep. I knew they weren't true. I smiled and let it go anyway, because I told myself this is what good daughters do. So I kept sending the money, nearly $400 a month. Consistent, quiet, no complaints. No one mentioned it. No one thanked me. It's not that I didn't care. It was that I believed this was my duty. And somewhere deep down, a part of me still hoped that maybe quietly holding everything together would finally make them see my worth. But that day, after that phone call, family suddenly felt like a one-way contract I had never actually signed. Once the ringing in my ears faded, I picked up my phone again. My hands were still shaking, but my mind had gone strangely calm, like a lake after a storm. I opened my banking app and scrolled to the transaction history. I wanted to know. How much had I actually spent on them these past 2 years? Electric bill, water bill, internet service. Every month, right on time, automatically pulled from my account like clockwork. About 400s a month. I scrolled all the way down to the bottom. The total number stared back at me. 9,842 tests. I stared at that figure for a few seconds. Not because it shocked me, but because something inside my chest quietly settled. Not sadness, not even anger. Just emptiness. Nearly $10,000. And today I had been officially labeled the embarrassment of the family. As I stared at the list of payments, another thought surfaced. A simple question no one in my family had ever bothered to ask. Has Melissa ever done as much for our parents as I have? It wasn't jealousy. I wasn't trying to keep score. But if I was the shame, what standard were they using? I took a slow breath, then navigated to another section of the app, the automatic payments tab. 3 recurring transfers: electricity, water, internet. One by one, I opened each and hit cancel. No hesitation, no trembling hand. I wasn't doing it to get even. I was doing it to keep the one thing I still had left. My self-respect. The only thing they hadn't already taken. When I finished, I set my phone face down on the counter and leaned back against the kitchen cabinet. The apartment felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Outside, a car drove by. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The world continued like nothing had happened. Inside, one sentence had ended an entire era of my life. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I didn't explain. I just let the silence stretch, and I had no idea how loud that silence would become 3 weeks later, on my mother's birthday. About a week after I canceled the payments, I got the first message. It was from Mom. Her name lit up my screen just as I was sitting down on the couch with a bowl of reheated pasta and a tired brain. For a second, my heart did that old, reflexive jump, the one you have before your mind remembers. Oh, right. We're not that kind of family anymore. I opened the message. I just got a notice that the internet bill is due. Can you take care of it? No, how are you? No mention of what had happened on that phone call. No hint of an apology. Just a request, just another bill. I stared at the screen for a moment, the blue light reflecting off the silver fork in my hand. Then I flipped the phone over on the coffee table, face down. I didn't reply. Not to punish her, not to score some point, but because in that moment, it was painfully clear that the first thing they thought to reach out about was still money, not me. 2 weeks later, my phone rang in the middle of the afternoon while I was reviewing a report from our engineering team. Dad. I watched his name flash on the screen, my thumb hovering over accept. Old habit told me to pick up. New reality told me to let it ring. I let it ring. He called again. I let that ring too. A few minutes after, a voicemail notification popped up. I put the call on speaker and set the phone on my desk. His voice filled the room, sharp and impatient. The power company called. This month's bill hasn't been paid. What's going on with you? No, how are you, Annabelle? No, can we talk about what happened that day? Just a complaint about the missing payments. Just confusion that his invisible daughter had finally stopped acting like a silent backbone. I ended the playback, locked my phone, and slid it into the drawer. I stayed silent through it all. Then came my mother's birthday. 3 weeks to the day since he told me not to come home if I planned to call him Dad. That afternoon, at exactly 4:05 p.m., I was in my living room with a mug of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. Outside, the sky was a dull gray. No rain, just that damp Pacific Northwest chill that seeps into your bones and stays. My phone buzzed. Mom calling. I watched it flash on the table. I could imagine her in the kitchen, in her favorite floral apron, rushing to get everything ready. For the first time in my life, I didn't imagine myself there with her. Not carrying plates, not decorating, not running last-minute errands. I let the call go to voicemail. A minute later, Dad called, then Melissa. 3 calls in less than 10 minutes. I ignored them all. No curiosity, no urge to respond. There was a strange, unfamiliar peace in deciding not to rush where I was clearly unwanted. I leaned back into the couch, eyes tracing the condensation on the window. The world outside looked blurred at the edges, like someone had smudged the day with their thumb. About 10 minutes later, the messages began. Mom went first. Annabelle, the power's been shut off. The whole house is dark. Please pay the bill. I read it once, slowly. I wasn't angry. I wasn't delighted either. There was just this heavy, hollow ache spreading through my chest. The kind you get when you've been carrying something for years, only to realize everyone assumed it was weightless. Then Dad. No water, we can't cook, handle it now. Then Melissa. Internet's down, guests are arriving, please fix this, urgent. I glanced at the clock, 5:12 p.m. I remembered clearly. I had canceled every automatic payment exactly 3 weeks earlier. Electricity, water, internet. All the invisible systems that made their lives comfortable had been running on my name, my income, my willingness to stay small. And now, in the middle of Mom's birthday party, the one they told me not to attend, everything had started shutting off. The power, the water, the internet. One by one, right when they needed it most. I didn't reply to any of them. I just sat there holding my cooling mug, watching my breath fog up the window. Because in that moment, I understood something very clearly. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because their safety net had walked away. By around 6 p.m., my phone started buzzing again. But this time it wasn't my parents or Melissa. It was the relatives. The ones who appear for holidays and family dinners, eat the food, make the small talk, and then go home feeling entitled to an opinion on everyone else's life. The messages came in waves. You're being disrespectful, Annabelle. How could you do this on your mother's birthday? You embarrassed her in front of all of us. One said plainly, your sister was right. People like you shouldn't show up on happy days. I read each message quietly, my expression barely changing. Not replying didn't mean I agreed. It meant I was done trying to defend myself to people who had already decided my role in the story. Scapegoat, background daughter, the one who should be grateful for scraps. I was about to put the phone aside when it lit up again. This time it was Aunt Lauren. We were the only two in the family who still used this old video calling app. She liked seeing people's faces when the conversation mattered. I liked that with her. I didn't feel like a stranger. I hesitated, my thumb hovered. Then I accepted the call. Her face appeared first, soft, lined with age, lit by the warm yellow light of my parents' kitchen. A kitchen I knew by heart. Every crack in the tiles, every cabinet that stuck. Tonight, it looked smaller somehow. Behind her, I heard clinks of silverware, a forced burst of laughter, the low murmur of people making small talk in the dark with candlelight and phone flashlights. Annabelle, she said gently, are you there, sweetheart? Her voice didn't carry accusation, just concern. I'm here, I replied. She studied my face through the screen, her eyes flickering with something between worry and understanding. You're not going to pay it, are you? She asked quietly. Her question wasn't a trap. It felt more like, tell me the truth. I'll stand in it with you. I took a breath. You know when words have been bottled up for so long that finally saying them feels like trying to lift something heavy underwater? You know, Auntie, I began, my voice low. It was Dad who told me not to come. Her eyebrows pulled together. He said if I insisted on showing up for Mom's birthday, I shouldn't call him my father anymore. She went silent. I watched her eyes dart slightly, scanning the room behind her. I could almost feel the way the air shifted there, like the house itself had heard me. And then, through the phone, the noise around her sharpened. Mom's voice burst through in the background, more shrill than usual. Tell her I'm ashamed of her, on this day of all days. How could she do this to her mother? Then Dad, louder, closer, his temper barely leashed. It's not that serious, it's just a few bills. What kind of daughter gets petty over money? Another voice chimed in, an uncle, I think. Poor Melissa, having to deal with a sister like that. I watched all of this play out in the shaky frame of my aunt's phone, like a theater scene I suddenly had front row seats to, but no one knew I was watching. Footsteps approached. Melissa stepped into view behind Aunt Lauren, arms crossed, lips pinched with irritation. Her hair was perfectly styled, her dress spotless, even in the dim, emergency lighting. She even picked up the call, Melissa scoffed. Mom's been crying all day. Does Annabelle even care? Seriously, no shame at all. Each sentence was like someone laying bricks on an already high wall between us. I didn't say a word. I just watched, held onto my silence like armor. My aunt shifted the phone as more people moved around her. Voices overlapped. Somewhere a child whined. Someone cursed about the dark. And then, from the left side of the screen, another figure stepped into frame. A young man, mid-30s maybe, in a dark suit with his tie slightly loosened. His hair was neatly combed, his expression a little bewildered by the chaos. He glanced at the phone in my aunt's hand. His eyes met mine on the screen. For a moment, his brows furrowed like he was trying to place me. Then recognition flashed across his face. His posture straightened. Hi, he said, voice rough with surprise. Hey, boss. The kitchen behind him seemed to freeze. Someone whispered, just off screen. Wait, what did he just call her? My aunt's hand shook slightly. Melissa's face drained of color. Through the tiny speaker, I heard another relative murmur. Boss? Did he say boss? And there, framed by my parents' darkened kitchen, with candles flickering and phones lighting up worried faces, I stared at the man everyone in that house had been desperate to impress, while he looked straight at me and called me boss. For a moment, no one moved. Not my aunt holding the phone, not the relatives frozen mid-whisper, not even Melissa, who looked like someone had just unplugged her from reality. The man in the suit, neatly combed hair, slightly loosened tie, face soft with confusion, shifted his gaze from me to the room around him. He seemed to feel the tension even through the dim lighting and birthday chaos. Someone finally broke the silence. Did he just say boss? Is he talking about Annabelle? And then another voice, sharper. Wait, is that Melissa's boyfriend? It was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, one truth tipping into another. Rumors and assumptions collapsing. The man straightened his posture, tugged lightly at his jacket as if remembering where he was, or rather, remembering who I was. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly enough for the room to hear. I work at Pacific Terratech. He paused, glancing briefly at Melissa before looking back toward the phone. And Ms. Whitman here is one of the co-founders. You could have heard a pin drop, a whisper, a heartbeat. Even the clinking of plates stopped. Melissa's expression twisted, shock, confusion, humiliation all swirling together. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again like she had to manually remember how to breathe. My father, who had once proudly told relatives that Melissa was dating someone important, now stared at his daughter's boyfriend like he was seeing a ghost. Or worse, an unwanted truth. Someone whispered, co-founder, as in, she's his boss? Another replied, but I thought she just worked with computers or whatever. Aunt Lauren tilted the phone to make sure the whole room saw me clearly. The birthday candles flickered behind her. The house was still half dark without electricity. All those faces I knew since childhood, looked at me with a level of startled realization they had never shown me in 30 years. And for the first time in my life, I did nothing to fill the silence. I didn't explain, didn't soften the moment, didn't shrink myself. I simply nodded once, slowly. Hope your introduction goes perfectly, I said to him. Calm, steady. It wasn't spite, it wasn't a jab, just truth. He nodded back, respectful. Thank you, Ms. Whitman. And before anyone could fire off questions, excuses, or demands, I ended the call. That night, I slept. No tossing, no replaying the day's events over and over, no imagined conversations where I defended myself to people who never listened. Just sleep, deep, uninterrupted, peaceful. Not because I felt triumphant, not because some long-awaited revenge had finally played out, but because, for the first time, they saw me. For one clear, undeniable moment, they had to look at me and see something other than the family embarrassment, something other than the shadow next to Melissa. They had to see me as I really was. Not invisible, not lesser, not disposable. Just Annabelle. The email the next morning. When I woke, sunlight was slipping through the blinds, painting soft lines across the floor. I reached for my phone, expecting the usual company updates, engineering notes, maybe some spam. But there it was, a name I didn't recognize. From Hudson Kane. Subject, I'm sorry. I sat up straighter. Hudson, the man in the suit, Melissa's boyfriend. I opened it. Ms. Whitman, I didn't know you were Melissa's sister. I've always respected you at the company. What I witnessed tonight, I didn't expect her to be like that. I'll be ending this relationship. He wrote it cleanly, honestly, without hiding behind excuses. Thank you for not putting me on the spot in front of everyone. I'm sorry things unfolded the way they did. I leaned back against my pillows, letting the words settle. There was no satisfaction, no gloating, just a quiet certainty. The kind you feel when puzzle pieces finally click into place. I typed back, Hudson, that's your decision. I don't expect anyone to change their personal life because of me. Think carefully before you do anything. And for the record, I keep work and family separate. I hit send, closed the laptop, and took a deep breath that felt like unclenching a fist I didn't know I'd been holding. Melissa's first message. Around 10 a.m., right after a meeting with our engineering lead, my phone buzzed. Melissa. I stared at the name for a few seconds, then pressed decline. 5 minutes later, a text came through. I'm sorry. I didn't think Hudson would do that. You're his boss. If you said something, he'd listen. Please talk to him. Ask him to come back to me. I read the message once, another time, and again. Then I walked to the hallway window, leaning my forehead lightly against the cool glass. I typed slowly, calmly, no anger, just truth. Hudson didn't leave because of me. He left because of how you treat people, how you look down on things you don't understand, and how you assume that, with a soft enough voice, you can steer anyone. Sent. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Less than a minute later, another message. I know I messed up. I mean it. I'll change. Just this once, please. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something. Sometimes the distance between two people isn't measured by apologies. It's measured by when the apology comes. I deleted the message and turned back to the life happening around me. Meetings, decisions, work, reality. For the first time in years, it felt like mine. A week later, the garage door rolled shut behind me as I stepped into the cool shadow of the hallway. I was thinking about a design flaw one of our interns discovered that morning. Nothing emotional, nothing to do with family. And then I froze. 2 suitcases rested on my front porch. 2 familiar figures stood beside them. My parents, looking travel-worn, tired, and strategic. And I knew instantly this wasn't a visit. This was a moment, a turning point, a test. I opened the door without a word. They stepped inside. The tea on my living room table was still steaming. And for the first time since childhood, we were about to have an honest conversation. They stepped into my living room like strangers who weren't sure if they were welcome, yet were already certain they deserved to be. Dad looked around first, his eyes scanning the place with that familiar mixture of judgment and entitlement. Mom followed quietly behind him, clutching the handle of her suitcase a little too tightly, like she was bracing herself. I didn't ask why they were here. I already knew. People don't fly across states with luggage unless they want something big. Sit, I said calmly, gesturing toward the sofa. My voice surprised even me. Smooth, steady, without the tremble of old instincts trying to please them. They sat. I sat across from them. No one spoke for a moment. The tea between us released faint curls of steam into the air. Gentle, almost peaceful. The complete opposite of what I knew was coming. The apology. Dad spoke first. His tone was controlled, too controlled, measured, practiced. Annabelle, we've thought about things, about what happened. Mom quickly added, we shouldn't have said some of the things we said. It was the heat of the moment. Heat of the moment. I let the words float between us, tasting their hollowness. Dad nodded solemnly, as if awarding himself points for taking responsibility. We know things went too far, he said. Went too far? He told me not to call him my father. He told me I would embarrass the family. They weaponized the love I gave, then demanded more. Went too far, felt like calling an earthquake a small shake. I didn't interrupt. I let them speak because I needed to hear whether this apology had a heart behind it or a price tag. Mom reached forward, placing her hand gently near her teacup. careful not to spill. "We're family, Annabelle," she said softly. "Family helps each other." A familiar line. A line they only ever used when help meant you owe us. Dad straightened his back, clearing his throat. "We raised you," he reminded me. "Fed you, housed you, sent you to school. Everything you have now, a part of it comes from us." There it was, the shift, the turn. The apology dissolving like sugar in hot water, leaving only the bitter grounds behind. I kept my posture relaxed, my hands folded gently in my lap. "And?" I asked quietly. They exchanged a look. Mom signaling Dad, Dad picking up where she left off. "If you could send us about $2,000 a month," he said plainly, "just a little support, it would help a lot." Mom nodded quickly. "It's not much for someone in your position, sweetheart." There it was, the price tag. A concrete monthly rate attached to their love. Their apology had a subscription fee. My parents, who once said my presence would shame them, now valued me as a direct deposit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let my expression harden. I took a slow breath, leaned back slightly, and asked the question I knew they were terrified to answer. "What about Melissa?" The moment the name left my lips, both of them froze. Dad's jaw tightened. Mom lowered her eyes. "How much will Melissa be contributing each month?" I repeated. Mom spoke first, her voice smaller now. "Your sister's job, it's still unstable," she murmured. "And her breakup with Hudson, it's taken a toll on her." Melissa, always the exception, always protected, always the child who never had to give, only receive. Same script, different year. I nodded softly, not surprised, not hurt, just done. Then I set my own terms. "If Melissa agrees to support you with $2,000 a month," I said, "I'll do the same, no more, no less." The air thickened with tension. Mom blinked, confused. Dad's face darkened like a storm rolling in. Before they could speak, I continued. "Or," I added evenly, "if you want me to carry the full amount, we can do that too. But I'll need something in writing, signed and notarized." Dad's lips tightened. "A legal document," I clarified, "confirming that after you pass, the family house will come to me in full." The room went silent, heavy. I didn't look away. I didn't fidget. I didn't soften the edges of my words. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the daughter they could guilt, silence, or manipulate. I was a grown woman setting boundaries. And they didn't know how to handle that. The explosion. Dad shot to his feet so suddenly the teacup rattled against its saucer. His hand came down hard on the table. Crack! Tea sloshing over the rim and spilling across the wood. His voice boomed through the room. "You're setting conditions for your parents?" He gestured wildly. "We raised you for over 20 years, and you want to nickel and dime us like this?" His chest heaved. "What kind of life are you living, Annabelle?" He was shouting so loudly I wouldn't be surprised if the neighbors heard every word. Mom reached for his arm, trying to calm him, but he jerked away. "You're ungrateful," he roared. "Ungrateful." And still, I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't shrink. I simply sat there, letting his anger wash over me like a wave that had crashed too many times to matter anymore. When he finally ran out of breath, the room hung suspended in raw, shaking silence. Then I stood, slowly, calmly. My voice was low, quiet enough to make them lean in, but clear enough to cut through what remained of his outburst. "I think you both should leave my house." Not a threat, not a dramatic scene, just a boundary, a line drawn cleanly across the floor. Dad stared at me, stunned. Mom looked between us, her lips trembling but no sound coming out. No one argued, no one apologized, no one pleaded. The next sounds were small. The dragging of suitcases across my hardwood floor, the front door opening, the front door closing. And then silence, a silence deeper than any I had ever heard. It was the quiet of a chapter closing, whether they accepted it or not. 2 years later, I didn't block their numbers, didn't change my email, didn't move or disappear. I simply stopped reaching out, and in 2 years, they never called to ask how I was, never texted on my birthday, never asked about my life, my health, my heart. The only messages I received were indirect, through relatives, hints, suggestions, reminders that they were struggling. Always about what they wanted from me, never about me. I used to think family could heal anything. I used to believe love was enough. I used to think I was the problem, that if I were kinder, quieter, more helpful, more patient, they would see me. Turns out, some people only see you when they need something. And some wounds heal only when you stop reopening them to prove you're willing to bleed. What I learned. Family is not a place where people get to demand your kindness and call it love. Real family, chosen or blood, is where you are seen as a person, not a resource. where your worth is not measured by what you can provide, where apologies don't come with monthly payment plans, where love isn't conditional on silence. I learned that stepping away from people who hurt you, even if they raised you, is not cruelty. Sometimes it's survival. After everything I've told you, I have a question. One I still think about sometimes. Was I wrong for saying no, for refusing the $2,000 a month, for choosing myself after a lifetime of being the invisible daughter? Or was this, finally, the moment I learned to love myself the right way? Tell me what you think. I genuinely want to know. If my story meant something to you, don't forget to hit subscribe. There are more stories waiting to be told and more truth waiting to be heard.